Have you ever watched a person get humiliated in public, only to realize they weren't the ones who should be feeling ashamed? It's easy to laugh at others when you don't know their story, but what if I told you that everything you thought you knew about this man's situation was wrong? In today's video, we're going to unravel a shocking tale of judgment, humiliation, and an unexpected twist that'll make you rethink everything you've ever thought about judging a book by its cover. Stick with me because by the end of this video, you're going to have a whole new perspective on what it means to show kindness to others. You won't believe what happens next. Imagine you're sitting in a cozy diner, surrounded by the hum of conversations, clinking silverware, and the comforting smell of pancakes and coffee. You look across the room and spot a single father, let's call him Dave, sitting alone at a booth with his daughter. He's got that worn-out look, the kind of exhaustion that tells you life hasn't been easy. He's dressed casually, not in the latest fashion, but his eyes carry a warmth, a quiet strength that you wouldn't immediately notice unless you were really paying attention. Across from him, his young daughter, maybe 6 or 7 years old, giggles, her small hands wrapped around a juice glass that seems almost as big as her face. It's a moment that, at first glance, seems totally ordinary, until you hear the conversation of the couple sitting at the table behind them. The couple, well-dressed and looking like they belong in some posh restaurant rather than this humble diner, begins whispering about Dave and his daughter. They're not even trying to hide their sneers. Can you believe that guy? A single dad, probably living off handouts, dragging his poor kid around in a diner like this. The woman says, her voice dripping with judgment. I mean, what kind of man can't even provide a better life for his kid? Her words hang in the air like a heavy weight, and you can see the husband nodding in agreement, making a comment about how they could never live like that. Dave doesn't even notice them. He's focused on his daughter, listening to her stories, laughing at her silly jokes. But you can feel the sting of their words even as they hit the air. And here's the kicker. The waitress, who has been quietly moving between tables, overhears everything. You might think she would ignore it, let the couple's words slide by like so many others do. But she doesn't. Instead, she makes her way over to Dave's booth, smiles softly, and says, "You know, I've seen you come in here a lot. And I just wanted to tell you, you're doing great. It's not easy being a single dad, but you're clearly doing your best." Dave looks up in surprise, not expecting the kind words. He smiles back, though a little uncertain. But that's when the waitress leans in just a little closer and says, "You know, there's a reason you're always so calm. And there's something about your daughter, something special about her, too. But I know the real story. And it's one you wouldn't believe. Not in a million years." The entire tone in the diner changes at that moment. The air gets heavier, and you can sense something more is coming. What could she possibly mean? What's the real story behind Dave and his daughter? Why would she say that? And why would she tell him something so personal in front of others who are watching? This moment is where the mystery begins. You've heard the judgment, but what if I told you that those people didn't have the full picture? What if the story behind this single dad and his daughter was far more complicated and more powerful than anyone could have imagined? The waitress, with her simple, caring gesture, is about to change everything for both Dave and the couple sitting behind him, but you're going to have to stick around to find out how. I promise you, this video isn't just about one dad and his daughter. It's about the way we all look at others, judge them based on fleeting moments, and never take the time to see what's really going on behind the scenes. By the time we're done here, you'll be questioning everything you thought you knew about making assumptions, and you'll have a story to tell about kindness, resilience, and the unexpected things that people carry with them every single day. But I'm not going to give it all away just yet. We're only scratching the surface of what's coming. So stay with me, because the real story is about to unfold, and trust me, you're going to want to see how it all plays out. You won't believe the truth behind Dave's situation, and you definitely won't see what happens when the waitress reveals what's really going on. Stay tuned, because you're about to witness something that's going to change the way you think about kindness, judgment, and the power of a single act of compassion. Dave's life hadn't always been this way. In fact, just a few years ago, things looked a whole lot different. He had a stable job in an office, a modest but comfortable apartment, and what seemed like the perfect little family. He was a good husband, a good provider, and he truly believed that everything in his life was on track. But that all changed one fateful night, when the unthinkable happened. His wife, Anna, someone he had known since high school, someone he thought he could trust with his entire life, made a choice that would unravel everything. It started with small things, texts that were just a little too friendly, late nights at work that seemed a little too convenient. But when Dave came home early one evening to surprise her with dinner, he walked in on something that shattered him to his core. There, in their living room, was Anna, laughing, her arms wrapped around a man Dave had never met before. That moment, right there, felt like his entire world was collapsing. The man, who looked as stunned as Dave felt, immediately stood up, but it was too late. The truth had been revealed in the most gut-wrenching way possible. Anna tried to explain, tried to justify what had happened, but there was no excuse. Their marriage was over, and as quickly as it fell apart, Dave found himself alone with nothing but his daughter, Mia, by his side. In the months that followed, things didn't get any easier. Anna, who had once been the love of his life, became a stranger. The divorce was messy. He fought for custody of Mia, but she was determined to keep things complicated. They came to an agreement, one that left Dave with less than he hoped for, but it was the only option he had. It wasn't just the legal battles that were exhausting, it was the emotional toll that came with losing the person he thought would always be there. His relationship with Mia, however, grew stronger. She became his everything. His tiny little girl who, despite the pain in their lives, still saw the world through hopeful eyes. Dave had to adapt quickly. He left his office job behind and took on several part-time gigs, sometimes working late into the night just to make ends meet. He never complained, though. He would always make it a point to show up for Mia's school events, play with her on the weekends, and never let her feel the weight of the world on her tiny shoulders. He had become a master of juggling responsibilities, doing everything he could to provide a good life for her while trying to rebuild the shattered pieces of his own existence. It wasn't glamorous. There were days when the bills piled up, when he had to stretch every dollar just to make sure there was enough for dinner, but Dave kept going. For Mia. But even as he struggled to get by, people like the couple at the diner made it seem like it was all his fault. They saw him as just another statistic, a man who had failed in the traditional sense. But what they didn't know was that Dave was far from a failure. He was a fighter. And while his past weighed heavily on him, it was his future with Mia that kept him going. He didn't need their judgment. He didn't need anyone telling him what he should or shouldn't be doing. He was doing the best he could with what he had, and sometimes that was more than enough. But things weren't all as they seemed. The couple's comments weren't the only source of tension in the diner that day. Dave had been feeling the weight of something else recently. Over the past few weeks, he had started receiving strange calls, all from an unknown number. They never left a message, but the ring of the phone, the feeling of uncertainty, had started to get to him. He'd even noticed someone following him a couple of times when he took Mia to the park. At first, he chalked it up to his nerves getting the better of him. But something didn't feel right. His gut told him that something was coming, something bigger than he could have imagined. And then there was the waitress. Her name was Sarah, and she had been working at the diner for years. Everyone knew her. She was the kind of person who always remembered your name, who made you feel like you belonged even on your worst days. But what most people didn't know was that Sarah wasn't just a waitress. She had been through her own struggles, some of which were buried deep beneath the surface. Her past was something she rarely spoke about, but there were whispers. Some said she had once been in a similar situation to Dave, a single mother, struggling to make ends meet. But others believed there was more to her story, something darker, something tied to her mysterious ability to read people. She seemed to know things about others that they hadn't even shared out loud. It was like she could see straight through them. And as Sarah watched Dave that day, she couldn't help but notice the cracks in his armor. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the way he stiffened when the couple made their cruel comments. But more than that, Sarah could sense something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface of Dave's carefully crafted facade. The tension in the diner was palpable. Every time Sarah moved past the couple, she could feel their eyes on her, but it was Dave who caught her attention. She'd seen that look in his eyes before. That look of a man who had been through something devastating but was too proud to let anyone see it. The moment Sarah approached his table, she wasn't just offering him a friendly gesture.
She was making a choice.
She knew she could offer him kindness, but she also knew there was something more to this situation, something that could unravel everything. She had seen people come and go from this diner, but Dave's presence felt different. There was something about him, something in his story, that she had to understand. But what was it? What was the secret she was about to reveal? And then there was Mia, the little girl who, despite everything she had been through, always seemed to light up a room with her innocent smile. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to Mia's happiness than met the eye. What was the real story behind this father-daughter duo? What was Sarah about to uncover that would change everything? As the diner buzzed with activity, the air around Dave, Sarah, and the couple seemed to thicken, drawing all eyes to the table. Sarah's next move would set everything into motion, and the truth, something so shocking, so unexpected, was about to come to light. But what would it be? Keep watching because the mystery is far from over. The next few days after that moment in the diner were tense. Dave couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The comment the waitress made, the way Sarah had looked at him with those knowing eyes, there was something in her gaze that hinted at a story she wasn't telling. It was like she was aware of something that could change everything, but for some reason, she wasn't ready to reveal it. It kept him up at night, this gnawing suspicion that he was missing a key piece of the puzzle, something big that was just out of reach. The phone calls continued, too. They didn't stop. Every time Dave heard that unknown number, his stomach would drop, and he'd hesitate before picking up. The voice on the other end was always calm, but there was a strange tension, like someone was trying to control the conversation without saying too much. It was almost as if they knew more about him than they should. More than he had told anyone, even Mia. He had a sinking feeling that whoever was behind these calls wasn't just some random person. It felt personal, like they were watching his every move. But the real kicker came one morning when Dave went to pick up Mia from school. It was a regular day, nothing out of the ordinary, until he reached into his jacket pocket to grab his keys and found that something was missing. His phone. He had put it in there just moments before, and now it was gone. He thought he must have left it at home, but when he got back to the apartment, it wasn't on the counter, it wasn't in his coat, and it wasn't anywhere in sight. He'd checked all over. Panic started to creep in. How could he lose it? His entire life was on that phone. Texts, emails, photos, everything he had been working on. And it wasn't just his personal life that was at risk. The calls, the strange messages, all of it could be tied back to that device. As if that wasn't enough, a few days later, when Dave went to his old office to tie up some paperwork, something he hadn't done in a while, he was met with an unexpected visitor. His former boss, Greg, who had always been kind to him, seemed nervous, almost uneasy. "Hey, Dave," Greg said, his voice slightly shaky. "Listen, I don't know how to say this, but you need to stop looking into things. I know it's tough. Man, I get it, but some things are better left in the past. You're digging in places you shouldn't." The warning felt off. Greg had always been the kind of guy who prided himself on loyalty. If anything, he would have been the one to help Dave out, not tell him to stop asking questions. Dave, however, didn't take the advice. Instead, he pressed. "What do you mean? What are you trying to tell me?" But Greg's face hardened, and his voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Just trust me on this, Dave. Don't go digging where you don't belong. There are people, powerful people, who you really don't want to anger." The words didn't make sense. Powerful people? What was Greg talking about? And why would he suddenly be acting so distant? He had always been one of the few people Dave could trust, but now something about him seemed off. It was as if Greg was hiding something, and whatever it was, Dave wasn't sure he was ready to hear it. As if that wasn't enough, the pieces of the puzzle were starting to slip further out of his grasp. One evening, Dave got home to find his apartment ransacked. His first thought was that someone had broken in, but nothing of value seemed to be missing. It wasn't about the money. It was about what had been touched. The papers he had been keeping about the divorce, about the custody battle with Anna, were all scattered across the floor. His mind raced. Had someone been looking for something specific? What were they hoping to find? Then, the last straw came when Mia's favorite drawing, the one she had made of their family for his birthday, was gone. It was a simple picture, something any child could have drawn, but it meant everything to him. It was one of the few things that had survived the collapse of his family, a reminder that he still had something to hold on to, something pure and untainted. But now it was gone. At that moment, Dave knew something far bigger was at play. Whoever was behind all this wasn't just interested in his past, they were after something he didn't even fully understand yet. And it wasn't just him they were targeting. Mia, his little girl, had been dragged into this mess, and now it was up to him to protect her at all costs. But then came the final blow. He returned to the diner, hoping to find Sarah again, to get some answers. But when he walked in, he was met with an empty booth. Sarah wasn't there. The manager, a woman named Carol, explained that Sarah had suddenly taken a leave of absence. Just a few personal things, Carol said, shrugging it off. But Dave couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just coincidence. Why had Sarah disappeared so suddenly, and why was the timing so strange? He had so many questions, but no answers. Then it hit him, he was being watched. Whoever had been calling him, whoever had broken into his apartment, had also made Sarah vanish. Everything was connected.
But why?
And who could he trust anymore? The couple from the diner had no idea what they had just witnessed. Sarah's cryptic words, the strange warnings from Greg, the disappearances, all of it pointed to something much darker than Dave had ever imagined. Was it just a coincidence that everything was falling apart? Or was someone orchestrating this entire thing, pulling the strings behind the scenes, manipulating events in ways that were beyond his control? And what about the waitress? Had she been trying to warn him all along? Was Sarah a friend, or was she another pawn in a game far bigger than Dave could comprehend? As the pieces of the mystery grew more tangled, one thing became clear. The truth was buried so deep that Dave might never be able to uncover it. But he had no choice. He had to keep going. For Mia. For himself. But the deeper he dug, the more dangerous things became. The clock was ticking, and soon, the answers would be out of his reach forever. Could Dave survive long enough to find the truth? Or was he already too late? The mystery was far from over. And now, the stakes were higher than ever before. Just when Dave thought the web of intrigue around him couldn't grow more complicated, he received an unexpected phone call. It came late one night, while Mia was asleep in her room, her soft breathing filling the otherwise silent apartment. The voice on the other end of the line was familiar, but it took Dave a moment to place it. It was Greg. But this time, there was no shaky hesitation in his voice. It was cold, calculated, as if he had made up his mind to say something that had been weighing on him for far too long. "Dave," Greg started, "you're in deeper than you think. I never should have said anything, but now it's too late. I've been watching your every move, and I see where this is headed. You've stirred up a hornet's nest, and trust me, you don't want to be anywhere near it when it explodes." Dave's heart pounded. "What do you mean?"
What are you talking about?
Greg's voice dropped lower, like he was afraid someone might hear him. "They're watching you, Dave. All of you. Mia, too. This isn't just about you, or the mess with Anna. This goes back much further. There are things you don't know, things you don't understand yet. And I'm not the only one who's been keeping an eye on you." Dave's mind raced. "Who else is watching me?" he demanded, his voice rising without thinking. Greg didn't answer right away, and the silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Greg spoke again, his words more measured this time. "You need to be careful. If you keep asking questions, you'll regret it. There are people who will stop at nothing to make sure you never get the answers you're looking for. Just walk away, Dave. It's not worth it." But before Dave could respond, the line went dead. He stared at the phone, his pulse quickening. What had Greg meant by they?
Who were these people?
And why was Greg so afraid? The more he thought about it, the more it seemed like Greg was hiding something, a truth that, if uncovered, could change everything. But the call had left him with more questions than answers, and once again, Dave was left in the dark, stumbling through a maze of half-truths and threats. The next morning, as if the universe had a twisted sense of timing, Mia came running into the kitchen, holding something in her tiny hands. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, but the object she was holding made Dave's stomach drop. It was a drawing, a crumpled one, but still recognizable. And it was the same one, the family portrait Mia had made for him on his birthday. The one that had gone missing from the apartment. He reached for it, but Mia pulled it away. "I found it, Daddy. It was under the couch," she said, beaming up at him. Dave's mind was spinning. How could the drawing have ended up under the couch? He'd searched everywhere for it, and it hadn't been there before. He looked at the picture closely, his eyes narrowing. There was something new in the corner of the drawing, something he didn't notice before. A tiny, almost imperceptible symbol, scrawled hastily in the corner. It looked like a strange combination of letters and numbers, almost like a code. Dave's hand trembled slightly as he took the drawing from her, pretending to smile and thank her for finding it, but his mind was already working overtime. What did the symbol mean? Why had it been added so suddenly? And who could have put it there? Had Mia seen someone in the apartment while he was away? The questions were mounting, but the answers remained elusive. He quickly tucked the drawing into his pocket, determined to investigate the cryptic symbol later, but he knew deep down that it was no coincidence. Someone was leaving him clues, and every new piece of information was leading him closer to something far more dangerous than he had anticipated. As the day wore on, the sense of paranoia grew stronger. Dave began to feel like he was being watched at every turn. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following him, though every time he turned around, there was no one there. And yet, the tension never seemed to ease. His every move felt scrutinized, as if he were a character in someone else's twisted game. Was he being paranoid? Or was there truly something lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike? Then came the second bombshell. As Dave sifted through some old paperwork in his apartment, trying to make sense of the mess, he stumbled across an envelope, one he didn't recognize. It had been tucked away in a drawer, buried beneath some of Mia's schoolwork. He opened it cautiously, his fingers trembling as he unfolded the letter inside. The note was short, but it sent a chill through him. It was typed, not handwritten, and the words were blunt. "Stop asking questions. You have no idea what you're dealing with. This is your final warning. Leave it alone before it's too late." There was no return address, no signature, just the cold, threatening message. Dave's breath hitched as he read it over and over, trying to make sense of what it meant. The warning was clear. Someone was not only trying to stop him from finding the truth, but they were willing to go to extreme lengths to keep him in the dark. The tension in Dave's chest grew heavier with each passing moment. Someone was playing with him, pulling strings he didn't even understand yet. And just when he thought things couldn't get worse, Mia came to him with a question that would turn his world upside down. "Daddy," she said, her small voice barely above a whisper. "Who is that man who comes to watch us when you're not home?" Dave froze. His heart pounded in his chest, his blood running cold. He had no idea what Mia was talking about. No one had come to watch them. Or had they? It was impossible, yet the certainty in her voice made it clear that she had seen something. Something he had missed. Everything he thought he knew was now being called into question. The drawing, the symbol, the letter, Greg's warning, Mia's strange statement. What did it all mean? Were they connected? Was there someone else in this web of lies that he hadn't accounted for? He didn't have the answers, but one thing was certain. The deeper he dug, the more dangerous this situation became. There were people with far too much power, and they were willing to do whatever it took to stop him from uncovering the truth. But now, with Mia involved, Dave had no choice but to keep going. He had to protect her, even if it meant uncovering things he wasn't ready to face. The stakes had never been higher. And yet, as the mystery deepened, so did the uncertainty. Who could he trust? And who was behind this twisted game? The answers were slipping further away, and with each passing day, Dave's chances of finding them seemed to diminish. But he wouldn't stop.
Not now.
Not when everything was on the line. The sense of dread that had been gnawing at Dave's insides for days reached a breaking point that night. It wasn't just the ominous messages or the unsettling symbol in Mia's drawing that kept him up. It was the feeling that something far worse was brewing, something he wasn't prepared for. His usual routines were no longer enough to offer any comfort. Every shadow in the corner of his eye seemed to hide a threat, and every flicker of movement outside his window made his pulse race. Paranoia, once a distant thought, had become his constant companion. It started with the phone call. Another one, but this time it wasn't Greg. This time, it was an unfamiliar voice. The voice was low, almost a whisper, as if trying to conceal its true intent, but the message was unmistakable. "You're being watched," the voice said, sending an icy chill down Dave's spine. "You don't know who's watching you, but we know who you are." The line clicked, and the call ended abruptly before Dave could even react. He stared at his phone, the weight of the words settling over him like a dark cloud. Was it the same person who had been sending him those cryptic notes? Or had things escalated even further? Trying to shake off the dread, Dave glanced over at Mia, who was playing quietly in the living room, her small figure framed by the soft glow of the lamp. She seemed oblivious to the rising tension around her, lost in her world of dolls and drawings. But Dave knew that nothing would be the same for them again. Whoever was behind all of this wasn't just trying to scare him, they were trying to make sure he stopped asking questions. And it was clear now that whatever they were hiding was worth any cost to keep buried. The next morning, the weight of it all pressed on Dave like a physical force. He tried to shake it off, telling himself that he was just being paranoid, but deep down, he knew that something wasn't right. As he walked to his car with Mia in tow, a strange sensation lingered in the air. He felt eyes on him, felt the chill of someone's gaze following him every step of the way. When he reached his car, he froze, his blood running cold. The door handle had been tampered with. It wasn't the usual wear and tear. It was as if someone had intentionally tried to gain access, maybe even planted something inside. The hair on the back of his neck stood up as his mind raced. Who could have done this? Was it the same person who had left the cryptic symbol in the drawing? Was it Greg, trying to warn him again? Mia tugged at his sleeve, oblivious to the danger. "Daddy, let's go. I'm hungry." Her voice cut through his mounting anxiety, but it also made it clear that he couldn't let her see his fear. He forced a smile, telling her everything was fine, and they got in the car. But the eerie feeling never left him. It followed him, the constant presence of something looming, waiting. He kept checking the rearview mirror, his eyes darting over his shoulder every few seconds, looking for anyone who might be following them. The day went on, but with every moment, the pressure seemed to mount. Dave couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. His phone kept buzzing with texts, messages from unknown numbers, all with simple, terrifying phrases. "Stop looking. You don't know what you're up against. Leave Mia out of it." It was clear that whoever was behind all of this had been following him for longer than he realized.
They knew about Mia.
They knew everything, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. His thoughts raced as he tried to piece together who could have been behind it all. Was it Greg? Someone else from his past? Or was it even worse, someone closer to him, someone he had trusted without question? It wasn't until later that evening, when Dave returned home to find the door slightly ajar, that the full weight of the situation crashed down on him. His heart skipped a beat as he pushed the door open slowly, Mia's hand in his, her innocent chatter suddenly a distant sound in his ears. The apartment looked undisturbed at first glance, but as they moved further inside, Dave's eyes caught something that made his blood run cold. The kitchen drawer was open, the contents scattered across the floor. The letter. The envelope. The one he had hidden just a few days ago, the one with the final warning, had it been taken? No, it was still there. But something else had been left behind. A photo. At first, Dave couldn't make out what it was, but when he stepped closer, his heart sank into his stomach. It was a picture of him, taken just days ago, standing in the parking lot of a local store. The photo was clear, too clear. And in the corner of the frame, almost hidden by shadows, stood a figure. A person he couldn't recognize, wearing a hat that obscured their face. The chill that ran down his spine was enough to paralyze him for a moment. Whoever this was, they had been right there, watching him.
But why?
And how had they known where he'd be? "Mia, get in the other room," Dave said, his voice shaky as he rushed to lock the door behind them. He tried to mask the fear in his voice, but his daughter could see it. Her face was full of confusion, but she didn't question him. She obeyed without hesitation, retreating to her room, her small footsteps fading down the hallway. Dave couldn't think straight anymore. His mind was a whirlwind of questions, of possible threats, of faces he couldn't recognize but knew were too close for comfort. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the phone rang again. This time it was a message, but no one spoke. The only sound was a faint click, followed by the unmistakable sound of a door closing, heavy, deliberate, as though someone was coming for him. His instincts screamed at him to run, but where could he go? Who could he trust? There was no time to think. His hands shook as he reached for the phone, but the screen went black before he could even unlock it. The message was gone. The world around him seemed to blur into a haze as the reality of the situation finally hit him. Whoever had been behind all of this had no intention of stopping. And now it was coming for Mia, too. The thought hit Dave like a gut punch. He had been too late. Too late to protect her, to stop the wheels in motion. The walls were closing in, and he was running out of time. He didn't know who to trust anymore. He didn't even know who was pulling the strings. The fear gnawed at him, suffocating him as he stood frozen in the middle of the apartment. And just as the darkness seemed to swallow him whole, a single, chilling thought crossed his mind. What if the person he had been searching for, the one responsible for all of this, had been in his life all along? And what if it was already too late to stop it? Just as Dave's mind raced with the thought that he was completely out of options, the doorbell rang. At first, he didn't want to answer it. Whoever it was, he wasn't sure he wanted to know. The messages, the photo, the phone calls, it all felt like it was closing in on him, each step taking him deeper into a nightmare. Yet, something in the back of his mind pushed him toward the door. Maybe it was desperation, maybe it was the need for answers, but with a shaky breath, he walked toward the door, glancing back at Mia one last time as she sat quietly in her room, oblivious to the storm surrounding them. When he opened the door, it wasn't a stranger on the other side, but someone he never expected to see. Mia's mother, Sarah. The last person Dave ever thought would show up, not after everything that had happened between them. Their relationship had been over for years, the divorce final, the bitterness lingering in the air like a permanent stain. Sarah had never been particularly involved in Mia's life, especially not in the way a mother should be, but now she stood there, looking almost unrecognizable. The woman in front of him wasn't the same one he remembered. Her face was pale, eyes wide with a fear he hadn't seen in years. The last time Dave had seen her, she was just a shadow of someone who had once been full of life, and even then, she was distant. Now, something about her seemed off, almost like she was hiding something more than the obvious tension between them. Before he could say anything, she stepped inside, her voice trembling. "You need to listen to me. It's happening again." "What are you talking about?" Dave asked, his confusion growing. The door was still slightly ajar, but he didn't care to look out at the street. His thoughts were too tangled to make sense of her sudden reappearance. Was this all part of whatever twisted game had been unfolding around him? "I know what you've been getting," she said, glancing nervously over her shoulder as if to make sure no one was watching. "The messages, the threats, they've been sent to me too. For months now. And I've kept quiet about it. I thought I could handle it on my own, but I was wrong. I don't know who's doing this, but I have an idea. You need to stop digging." Dave stared at her, disbelief spreading through him. "What do you mean, they've been sent to you too? Why didn't you tell me?" "I couldn't," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. "I thought if I just ignored it, it would go away. But it didn't. They know things about our past. Things I never told you. And now they're after Mia too." Dave felt the ground beneath him shift. For all the things that had been spiraling out of control, this revelation threw everything he thought he knew into question. Who were these people? What did they want from him, from Mia? And why hadn't Sarah told him any of this sooner? The confusion tightened its grip on his chest as he tried to process everything she was saying. "Mia's in danger?" Dave repeated, his voice sharp, his mind running through all the worst-case scenarios.
What do you mean by that?
You're telling me you've been getting the same kind of threats? Yes, Sarah replied, her eyes darting nervously around the room. And I think I know who's behind it. I should have told you this from the beginning, but I thought I could stop it on my own. I didn't want to drag you into this again. You wouldn't believe me if I told you, but I'm telling you now. This isn't random. This has everything to do with your family. Dave's heart skipped a beat. My family? Yes, Sarah replied quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. There's something you don't know about your father, about the history of this family. I was never supposed to be involved in this, but I can't keep running anymore. I've been trying to protect Mia. Trying to keep her safe from something you don't even understand. Something I barely understand myself. Dave's mind whirled as he processed her words. His father had never been a topic they discussed openly, not even when they were married. There were whispers, vague mentions of things in their past that never quite added up, but he never asked. His father had always been distant, cold even, but Dave never suspected there was something darker lurking behind the silence. Why didn't you tell me about this earlier? He demanded, the frustration building inside him. You've known all along, and now you come here and tell me this? I was protecting you, Sarah snapped back, her eyes flashing with anger. I didn't want you to get caught up in this mess, Dave. This isn't just about you anymore.
It's about Mia.
And there's no way you can stop it alone. Dave took a step back, trying to take everything in. His thoughts were chaotic, racing, and now with Sarah's confession, he was more uncertain than ever. What did his father have to do with this? What was Sarah hiding? Why hadn't she come to him sooner? But then, another thought struck him, sharp and cold. Could she have been involved all along? Had she been playing both sides, manipulating him, keeping him in the dark while feeding information to whoever was pulling the strings? As his mind raced with these thoughts, he caught movement out of the corner of his eye, something outside the window, a fleeting shadow. He whipped his head toward it, but by the time he looked, it was gone. Was it just his paranoia, or had someone really been watching them? His pulse quickened as he turned back to Sarah, his voice low and intense. What aren't you telling me, Sarah? What's really going on here? Her face paled, and she opened her mouth to speak, but before she could answer, the sound of a car engine revved loudly outside, cutting through the silence like a knife. Dave's heart skipped. He knew that sound. It was the same car he'd seen tailing him earlier. The one parked just down the street, always just out of sight. He bolted toward the window, but the car was gone, as if it had never been there at all. Was this another warning? Or had they really just crossed a line they couldn't come back from? For the first time in a long while, Dave realized something truly terrifying. He had no idea who he could trust anymore. And with Mia's safety on the line, he was about to find out just how deep this rabbit hole went. But the biggest question still loomed. Who was really behind this? And why had Sarah come back now? What did she know that she wasn't telling him? Dave's mind was spinning as he stood in the dimly lit room, the weight of Sarah's words still pressing heavily on his chest. Mia's life was now tangled in a web he didn't understand, and all of the pieces he had been so sure of suddenly felt like they belonged to a different puzzle. The knocks on the door had stopped, but there was an unshakable feeling that something even worse was lurking just around the corner. Every instinct told him to get out, to grab Mia, pack up, and run. But where would they go? Who could they trust? And why had Sarah appeared now, when things had already spiraled so far out of control? She was the one person he had never suspected, the one person who could have been hiding everything from him. But now that the truth was starting to slip through the cracks, he couldn't ignore it any longer. Something bigger was at play, and it wasn't just about threats or mysterious texts anymore. It was about survival. The sound of Mia's laughter echoed from the next room, and Dave flinched. She had no idea what was going on. She was still too young to fully understand the danger that was closing in on them. That was his responsibility. It had always been his responsibility. But now, with every passing moment, it felt like he was failing her. The weight of being a single dad, of protecting his daughter from the dark undercurrents that seemed to surround them, suddenly felt like too much to bear. And then there was the guilt that he hadn't seen the signs sooner, that he had kept Mia in the dark when she needed him to be the one with answers. And Sarah, she was a part of this now, whether Dave liked it or not. She hadn't been the mother figure he'd ever hoped for, but Mia deserved something more than just silence and secrets. But could Dave trust her? Could he trust anyone anymore? Sarah had dropped a bombshell, telling him that she knew things about his father's past, things she'd never shared before. Yet, despite the gravity of her confession, her words had left him with more questions than answers. Was she truly on his side, or was she hiding something more sinister? Was her sudden reappearance just another piece of the puzzle, or was she the one pulling the strings behind the scenes? The thought made his stomach churn. The woman who had been his wife, who had once promised to support him through everything, was now a potential liability. And worse, she was the only person who could offer him any answers, but he wasn't sure he could trust the answers she was giving. Suddenly, Dave's phone buzzed, a sharp reminder of the world outside his door. He looked at the screen, hesitating for a moment before answering. It was an unknown number, one that had been calling him relentlessly over the past few days. Each time, he'd let it ring out, too afraid to pick up, too afraid of what he might hear. But this time, something compelled him to answer. Dave. The voice on the other end was cold, calculated, and strangely familiar. You don't have much time left. If you want to keep your daughter safe, you need to make a choice. There are people who can help you, people who can protect you, but it comes at a cost. Dave's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to steady his breathing. Who is this? What do you want from me? He demanded, his grip tightening around the phone as though it could somehow change the direction of the conversation. The question is, what do you want? You can keep digging, keep trying to expose the truth. But be warned, there are people who won't hesitate to silence you if you get too close. The question is simple, really, your safety or the truth. You have to choose, Dave. If you keep going down this path, you might not survive the consequences. We're offering you a way out, but it won't come without a price. Dave's mind spun, his thoughts spiraling into chaos. His safety or the truth. How could he choose between the two? What was the cost of staying silent, of giving in to the people who wanted him to stop asking questions? And what would happen if he did keep searching, if he kept pushing for answers, if he dug deeper into the tangled mess that had become his life? The weight of the ultimatum felt suffocating, like a noose tightening around his neck, with no way to escape. He glanced over at Sarah, who was sitting silently on the couch, her hands wringing nervously in her lap. She had been so sure of what she knew, so certain that there was a hidden truth in his family's past. But now, Dave wasn't so sure if the past was where the danger was hiding. It was too easy to blame the unknowns, to pin it all on the people in the shadows who had been pulling strings behind the scenes. But maybe the truth wasn't as simple as that. Maybe there was someone much closer to him, someone he trusted, who was playing a much bigger role in all of this. Dave. Sarah's voice broke through his thoughts, and he turned to face her, his mind still reeling from the phone call. She was looking at him with wide, worried eyes, waiting for him to say something, anything. But how could he explain the feeling that something far worse was coming? How could he tell her that he was no longer sure if she was the ally she claimed to be, or if she was hiding something crucial, something that could unravel everything they thought they knew? Before he could respond, the doorbell rang again. This time, Dave's blood ran cold. He didn't want to answer it. Whoever it was, he wasn't sure he wanted to face them. But then he heard the sound of the footsteps, the sound of someone moving away, quickly. Whoever it was had just left. Without thinking, Dave rushed to the door, yanking it open. But when he looked outside, there was no one there. Only a small envelope, lying on the doorstep. His hands trembled as he reached down to pick it up. No return address. No name. Just an envelope sealed with a wax stamp, bearing a symbol he didn't recognize. His pulse quickened as he tore it open, his eyes scanning the message inside. The words, written in neat, careful handwriting, sent a chill through his spine. Keep pushing, and you'll regret it. There's more at stake here than you can imagine. Don't make us come after Mia. The world around Dave seemed to freeze as he stood there, the envelope in his hands, his mind racing. Whoever this was, they weren't playing games. This wasn't just a threat, It was a promise. A warning. And now, Dave realized just how far the people involved in this were willing to go to keep their secrets hidden. They were targeting the one person he couldn't afford to lose. Mia. The phone call, the threats, the mysterious envelope, it all pointed to one terrifying truth. They were out of time. And the choices Dave had to make would shape not only his fate but Mia's as well. The weight of the envelope in his hands felt like a lead anchor dragging Dave into the deepest waters. He had expected threats, sure. He had even braced himself for betrayal. But the depth of this, it was something entirely different. He couldn't shake the feeling that Mia wasn't just caught in the crossfire of his past mistakes. No, this wasn't a personal vendetta. It was much larger, much darker than anything he could have ever anticipated. He stood frozen in the doorway, his mind racing with thoughts of how this could all be connected. Every piece of the puzzle seemed to be slipping away faster than he could catch it. He had always thought his father's past was something to be ignored, buried away where it couldn't hurt anyone. But this, whatever this was growing to be something far more dangerous, something that threatened to drag him and Mia into a world they could never escape. The phone call, the cryptic message, and now this strange symbol on the wax seal. It wasn't just about his family anymore. This wasn't just some private vendetta, it was a carefully orchestrated network of lies, power, and manipulation stretching further than he could have ever imagined. Dave's chest tightened with a mix of rage and fear. He had thought the people closest to him, Sarah, Mia, his friends, were his allies. But the more he dug, the more everything about his life felt like it was built on lies. Sarah had dropped pieces of the puzzle, but she had only told him what was convenient. What didn't connect was what she kept hidden, the things she never shared, the things she'd been a part of without ever telling him. But now, it wasn't just Sarah who might be involved. This was bigger than his family, bigger than Sarah's hidden agenda. This was a web that spread through powerful hands and untold connections. Every move he made seemed to push him deeper into a world he wasn't prepared for, a world where secrets were currency and people were expendable. And just when he thought he was starting to put the pieces together, the truth slipped further out of his reach. He didn't even realize it, but Sarah had followed him to the doorway. "Dave, what's going on?" she asked, her voice thick with confusion and concern. But as she saw the fear in his eyes, something shifted in her expression. She hadn't even asked the right question. She was still playing the part of the concerned friend, the one who was just as much a victim as he was. But that was a lie. Everything was a lie. Before Dave could respond, the sound of Mia's laughter from the kitchen shattered the tension. It was a momentary distraction, but it didn't help him feel any less trapped. Mia was still blissfully unaware of what was happening, still tucked away in her little bubble of innocence. And that was what scared him the most. He couldn't protect her from what was coming. The stakes had just reached a level where no matter how hard he tried, he wasn't sure he could win. Sarah took a hesitant step toward him, her hand reaching for the envelope. But Dave jerked it away, holding it protectively against his chest. Something was shifting in the air. It wasn't just the message or the threats anymore. It was her. She had to know something. How could she not? Every time he thought he could trust her, her actions suggested otherwise. "You've been part of this, haven't you?" Dave's voice was low, hoarse. He couldn't help it. It was coming out before he could stop it. Sarah's face froze, and for a split second, Dave saw the mask slip. Her eyes flickered with something, guilt? Fear? But it was gone as quickly as it came. She swallowed hard, then took another step back. "What are you talking about?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, but there was a tremor beneath her words. Dave's heart slammed in his chest. Everything about her demeanor, every shift in her body language, screamed that something wasn't right. But it wasn't just about her anymore. The message had made that clear. There were people out there who were willing to go to any length to silence him, to make him forget what he was learning. The conspiracy was so much deeper than just the secrets Sarah was hiding. His own family was caught in a battle of power he had never understood. The people who had controlled the strings in his father's life were still out there, and they weren't going to let him walk away from this. His thoughts were interrupted by the screech of tires outside, followed by a loud bang at the door. A chill ran down Dave's spine as his instincts kicked in.
He knew what was happening.
This wasn't a warning anymore. It was a direct threat. With shaking hands, he grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her away from the door as another loud bang rattled the frame. Mia came rushing into the room, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "What's going on, Dad?" she asked, clutching the stuffed bunny in her arms like it would protect her from the chaos that was unfolding. Dave didn't have time to answer. All of a sudden, he heard the unmistakable sound of shuffling footsteps on the other side of the door.
Someone was trying to force their way in.
And he realized his worst fears were true. Someone was already inside, already too close. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Someone from inside his circle had betrayed him. Someone he trusted had set this all into motion, and now the people who had been watching them, stalking them, were finally ready to make their move. But who? Was it Sarah? Was it someone else? Could it be the person he had always thought was an ally? The one person who had given him a glimmer of hope in this hellish situation? Just when he thought he could make sense of it all, the truth seemed to slip through his fingers, like sand falling through an hourglass. The conspiracy wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everyone around him, everyone he cared about. And now, the clock was ticking. The walls were closing in, and the price of the truth was about to cost him everything he had left. Mia looked up at him, her eyes wide and trusting, and for a brief moment, Dave's heart shattered. What had he gotten them into? What choice did he have left? Would they make it out alive? His only hope was that they could hold on long enough to uncover the final piece of the puzzle, but that meant risking it all. And if he was wrong, it wasn't just his life on the line. It was Mia's, too. The danger was real, the threat was bigger than he could imagine, and now there was no turning back. Dave's heart hammered in his chest, the blood in his veins buzzing with adrenaline. The pounding at the door intensified, a deep, rhythmic thud that seemed to vibrate through the entire house. The world around him felt like it was closing in, the walls tightening, the air thickening with a suffocating weight of danger. He glanced at Sarah, who was standing motionless in the corner, her face pale and her hands trembling as if she had already accepted the inevitable. Mia, clinging to him with wide, innocent eyes, hadn't yet grasped the full gravity of what was happening. To her, this was just another strange night, another weird incident with her dad. She was safe for now, but for how much longer? The door rattled again, this time with enough force to make the hinges groan. Dave's mind raced as he moved toward the kitchen. Every muscle in his body was primed, every instinct telling him to run, to take Mia and flee, to save whatever he could. But there was no escaping it now. Whoever was behind that door had been watching him for longer than he'd known, and the answers, whatever they were, lay just beyond it. He couldn't run from the truth. Not anymore. The envelope in his hand, the one that had started all of this, seemed to weigh heavier by the second. Inside, the letter had been brief, cryptic, yet packed with more meaning than he had initially understood. A threat disguised as a warning. If you want the truth, you have to risk everything to find it. But now, standing in the dim light of the kitchen, with the sound of the door crashing against the frame with each blow, he realized that truth was about to be ripped from him whether he was ready or not. The phone rang suddenly, its shrill tone cutting through the silence, like a knife. Dave froze, his entire body tense, every hair standing on end. He didn't want to answer it. He couldn't. Not with everything happening in real time, with the mystery teetering on the edge of finality. But somehow, against his better judgment, his hand reached for the phone. "Dave." The voice on the other end was low, distorted, like it had been filtered through layers of static. "You've come too far. You think you're in control, but you have no idea what you're really dealing with. You're just a pawn. You always have been." Dave's blood ran cold. He didn't recognize the voice, but he could feel the malice in every syllable. The weight of the words echoed in his skull, the finality in the voice impossible to ignore. His stomach turned as the truth became painfully clear. There was no way to outsmart this game. The people behind it, the ones orchestrating this twisted web, had been pulling the strings all along. Mia, Sarah, his father's past, all of it was a carefully constructed illusion designed to trap him, to push him to this moment of reckoning. Who is this? Dave rasped, his voice betraying the fear that had begun to creep in. A low laugh crackled through the speaker. That's the wrong question. The question is, what will you do next? You've come so far, but there's no escape. You'll find what you're looking for, whether you want to or not. The call ended abruptly, and Dave's mind spun. He barely had a moment to process it before the door slammed open, the force knocking it off its hinges, revealing two men dressed in black, their faces concealed by masks. They stepped inside with deadly precision, their eyes scanning the room like wolves hunting prey. Dave instinctively moved to shield Mia, but before he could take another step, one of the men raised a hand, motioning for him to stay still. We know what you've been digging into, Dave. You've come too far. The man's voice was cold, emotionless, as if Dave's entire existence was nothing more than an inconvenience. It's time to stop pretending you have control over this. Without another word, the two men moved forward, each one flanking Dave as they began to close in. It was happening. It was real. This wasn't a game anymore. It was a fight for his life. A fight he hadn't been prepared for. Not at this level. His mind raced, scrambling for a way out, a way to protect Mia, but nothing made sense. There was no escape. No place to hide. And then, as if out of nowhere, Sarah spoke, her voice trembling but cutting through the tension like a blade. They don't know everything, Dave. She stopped abruptly, her eyes wide with horror, as if she had said too much. Dave turned toward her, but before he could ask what she meant, everything shifted. One of the masked men turned, his eyes narrowing at Sarah. You didn't think we'd find out, did you? His words were like a punch to Dave's gut, sending a jolt of realization through him. Sarah's face twisted in shame, and for the first time, Dave saw her true nature. She wasn't just some victim caught up in this. She had been a part of it. She had known more than she had ever let on. The betrayal hit him like a freight train. His mind reeled, trying to make sense of it all. How could she be involved? I didn't want you to know, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. But they promised me safety. I had no choice. You were never supposed to find out. The man closest to Dave took a step forward, his hand reaching out as if to finalize the moment of truth. But just as Dave prepared for the worst, there was a sudden burst of movement, a flash of something unexpected. The second man was suddenly tackled to the ground by a figure that appeared out of nowhere. It was Mia. The sight of his daughter, standing in front of him with defiance burning in her eyes, was enough to stop Dave's heart for a second. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. But before he could process it, Mia spoke, her voice unshakable. I know what you did to my dad. I know everything. And I'm not afraid of you. The room fell into a stunned silence. The men stared at her, their eyes wide, unable to comprehend what was happening. It was the last thing any of them had expected. Mia had known. She had understood it all before Dave had. It was impossible. It was unimaginable, but in that moment, Dave realized the truth. The conspiracy had never been just about him or his father. It had always been about Mia. She was the one they had been watching all along, the one they had underestimated. They had failed to realize that the person they had underestimated most was the one who had the power to destroy everything they had built. And just like that, the game had changed. The silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred. The masked men, stripped of their power in the wake of Mia's unexpected defiance, seemed momentarily stunned, as if the rules they had played by no longer applied. One backed away slowly, calculating his next move, while the other lay groaning on the ground, clutching his side where Mia's sudden ambush had landed with a force no one her age should have had. Dave stood frozen in disbelief, watching his daughter, now lit by the flickering kitchen light, looking so small yet radiating a strength that seemed beyond her years. In that moment, everything he thought he knew crumbled, not just about the conspiracy or Sarah's betrayal, but about himself, his role as a father, protector, and pawn in a game that had always been so much bigger than he could have imagined. Authorities would arrive later. tipped off by a neighbor who heard the commotion and called 911. The masked intruders vanished just moments before sirens wailed in the distance, leaving behind only fragments of what they had come to do. Sarah was taken in for questioning. Her story unfolded like a tragic confession. She had once been part of a covert research initiative tied to Dave's late father, a government contractor who'd been developing behavioral prediction models powered by AI and biometric surveillance. Dave's own history, his decisions, even his relationship with Mia had been tracked, logged, and shaped by algorithms coded years ago. The program had been quietly dismantled after it became too controversial, too dangerous. But a rogue faction, desperate to revive it, had tried to use Dave's fractured life as the catalyst to bring it back. Sarah, fearing for her own family's safety, had agreed to play her part, until guilt finally cracked her facade. In the weeks that followed, Dave found himself untethered from everything he once believed to be real. The house, the job he had walked away from, the friendships that now felt paper-thin, all of it was seen through new eyes. Mia, however, became his anchor. She never spoke again of that night, nor of how she had known when to act or what exactly she had seen. But something had changed in her. She asked more questions, read more books, looked at the world with a cautious, calculating gaze, as if she too had come to understand that life was not as simple as cause and effect. Dave sometimes caught her staring into space, eyes distant, like she was solving a puzzle only she could see. He never pushed her. Some truths, he realized, needed to unfold on their own timeline. One day, while sorting through the belongings his father had left behind in the attic, Dave discovered a sealed envelope tucked inside an old toolbox. It was labeled with nothing but the date of his own birth. Hands trembling, he opened it to find a single sheet of paper and a faded photograph. The photo showed a younger version of his father standing beside a woman Dave didn't recognize, until he flipped the photo over and saw the name scrawled in his father's careful handwriting: Project Eve, Subject Alpha. The woman in the picture was Sarah. Only the date made it more disturbing. It had been taken years before Dave had even met her, before he thought their lives had intersected naturally. Beneath the photo, the note simply read, "Some people aren't placed in your life by chance. Watch the child. She's the key." Dave sat there for a long time, staring at those words, letting the weight of them sink in. The conspiracy hadn't just been about him. It had been about Mia all along. She wasn't just a target. She was the result of something bigger, something that started long before he was born. And maybe that's why they'd been watching. Maybe that's why they'd stopped once she stood up to them. They had seen what she was becoming, and they were afraid. Months passed. Dave relocated with Mia to a quiet coastal town far from the shadows that once followed them. He never spoke publicly about what happened. There were no headlines, no viral videos, no trending hashtags like #DeepStateLeak or #AIChildMystery, just whispers and unanswered questions. Sometimes, late at night, he'd see a black SUV parked too long across the street or catch a stranger watching Mia a little too closely. But they never stayed long. Whatever game had been playing out in the background of their lives seemed to pause, or maybe retreat, as if waiting for its next move. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long golden streaks across the ocean, Mia sat beside him, her hand wrapped around his. She was quiet, but her eyes sparkled with thought. Dave leaned down and asked if she was okay. She looked up at him and smiled, not the smile of a child but of someone who had seen more than most people ever would. "It's not over," she said softly, "but I think we get to choose what happens next." And with that, she stood and walked down to the shoreline, letting the waves wash over her feet, fearless in the face of a future still steeped in mystery. Dave stayed where he was, watching her silhouette against the endless ocean, realizing that some answers were meant to stay unanswered, and that peace didn't always come from truth. It sometimes came from learning to live in the space between knowing and not knowing. The game might still be out there. But for now, they had found something stronger than fear. They had found each other. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.